Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anurekha Chariwag, Assistant Professor at the Department of Sociology, Savitribai Phule, Pune University. Today we are going to discuss the module Understanding Contemporary Ruralities Part 2. This module is part of the paper Agrarian Relations and Social Structure in India. This module is coordinated by Dr. Manish Thakur of IIM Kolkata. What does this module focus on? It focuses on emerging dimensions of contemporary rurality. It focuses on sense of promising areas of sociological inquiry. It would also give us an understanding about village social transformation, especially in terms of policy, and focus on development, village and state rurality. After almost 6-7 decades of rural development programs and the functioning of modern democratic state, it is almost impossible to talk of a village in the old sociological language of caste community, kinship and mutual and reciprocal economic interdependence such as the Jajamani system. There is no gainsaying that villages have over the years been part of a development narrative of post-independence Indian state. In the eyes of the planners and the policy makers, the village lacked development. Villages were seen as a backward and superstitious, lacking enterprise innovation. They fared badly on all possible indicators of human development by remaining poor, undernourished and illiterate. They showed higher rates of morbidity and mortality, including infant and maternal mortality. They lacked access to quality health and educational facilities, lacked hygiene and sanitation. In a way, the villages, to the extent they lacked development, they called for development and modernization to mitigate all the ills that plagued them. This meant large-scale introduction of government policies to the villages. In this module, we'll take you through some of these government initiatives. We want you to realize that village of the day is deeply implicated in the functioning of the state and is inevitable part of the development discourse. You'll also see that the dominance of development discourse has led us to see the village as part of a crisis narrative. We remember villages for more than what they lack than what they are. We think of them in terms of crisis situations like farmer suicide or caste panchayats, or the migration problem, the burden of patriarchy through khap panchayats, or more recently in terms of communal rights. In this module, we want you to appreciate some of the emergent discussion of contemporary rurality. At the same time, we want you to keep in mind that state has a decisive say in the recasting of some of the aspects of contemporary rurality. Village are the cusp of multiplex changes emanating from multiple sources. You know it too well that they are not and never were autonomous self-sufficient republics. In the module, we'll emphasize some of the substantive changes that villages have witnessed. In a way, we'll also indicate some of the promising areas of sociological inquiry in the wake of accumulated challenges that keep shaping and reshaping our idea of village and rurality. Government initiatives. We have selectively tried to focus on some of the government initiatives that underline our argument about the crucial role of the state in shaping of contemporary rurality. Market increasingly is linked to the affairs of the state, and towards the end of this module, we'll talk about entrepreneurship and innovation. Malnutrition. In order to improve the condition of poor villages, the Government of India has undertaken several initiatives such as controlling the price of some staple food, introducing food for work programs, employment guarantee programs and midday meals for school-going children. Apart from these programs, the largest nutrition supplement program is the Integrated Child Development Services. ICDS was launched in October 1975. It is India's largest health program. The aim of this program is to promote nutritional health and status of the children below the age of 6 years by reducing the causes of mortality, morbidity, malnutrition and school dropout. In addition to this, pregnant and lactating women are also given special emphasis so that they can look after the health and nutritional needs of their children. To achieve these objectives, a package of services including supplementary nutrition, immunization, health checkup, referral services, preschool, non-formal education and nutrition and health education has been designed. Those services are executed from Anganwadi centers. The workers and helpers of the AWCs are provided with proper training and honorarium. It has been thought that the effects of the scheme would be larger if the services are rendered in an integrated manner instead of a gradual basis. The Supreme Court of India gave an order on 28 November 2001 that ICDS should render services in every hamlet in the country, covering all the children below 6 years, pregnant women, lactating mother and adolescent girl. Sinha argues that ICDS provides services to only 22% of India's young children, hence the rest 78% are deprived. In this context, Deepa Sinha points out that in India there is only 6 lakh Anganwadis. At least 17 lakh Anganwadis are required to meet the whole demand. Now there are 14 lakh Anganwadi across the country. Many scholars argue that ICDS program has many flaws in the implementation and design. Some problems include lack of training among the Anganwadi workers, inconsistency in supply, leakage in food production, lack of nutritional food supply to the malnourished, and a lack of community participation. The program is executed in a top-down manner and the workers mostly emphasize on cooking and serving of food. They do not put much effort on the sanitation and the hygiene practices. Some scholars have worked on ICDS. Gill argues that there is a scarcity of Anganwadi centers in SCs, STs and Muslim habitations. In multi-caste villages, Anganwadi centers are not located in areas where underprivileged sections of the society reside. Mandar and Kumaran are of the opinion that the location of Anganwadi centers is decided by politically powerful groups in the village, mostly dominated by the upper caste. They are also of the opinion that a considerable number of children in need do not get access to ICDS services. To them, it is an outcome of active social discrimination based on caste, gender and disability. During 2006-07, the number of children below the age of 6 years was 17.7 crore. Among them, only 7.22 crore children reap the benefits of ICDS. Therefore, a large section of children are out of reach of this program. Shortage in financial allocation is another major problem of ICDS. The 11th 5-year plan mentions an allocation of 8,480 crores rupees per annum to the ICDS. Divakar argues that such financial shortfall is an important cause for the poor quality of food. Kent argues that people should be aware about their rights so that they can make a judgment whether or not they are getting what they are supposed to be getting. Health. Since independence, the Government of India has been focusing on health, supply-side health policies including the Rural Health Policy 1977 and National Rural Health Mission 2007. Besides this, the Government of India has also launched some demand-side health policies such as Janani Suraksha Yojana and the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. The former is a conditional cash transfer program for pregnant mothers and the latter is a health insurance program, especially for the people who reside in remote areas lacking public health facilities. It has been observed that villages having public health facilities suffer from lack of medical personnel, shortage of equipment, high level of absenteeism of medical staff and poor quality of treatment. It increases the dependency of rural poor on private practitioners. Some of these practitioners have no formal medical training. Viewed thus, this program is a path-breaking initiative that gives confidence to the rural poor to access both public and private healthcare facilities by providing financial assistance to them. On the other hand, health insurance policy initiated by the government encourages the private sectors to expand their markets in the rural areas. The tendency of pushing health policy is rapidly growing among Indians. It is estimated that in 2007 only 75 million people had health insurance coverage. The number has been increased to 302 million in 2010, encompassing almost one-fourth of the country's population. RSBY is one of the world's largest health insurance program. It is meant for people belonging to below poverty line. Besides socioeconomically disadvantaged people, including domestic workers, laborers working in construction sites and beadi makers are also considered as beneficiaries of this program. The program is managed through a public-private partnership model. The provision of insurance coverage is contracted out to private insurance companies. The beneficiary household only pay a registration fee of rupees 30 to the government and in return they obtain an inpatient health care coverage up to rupees 30,000 annually. Apart from this, they also get transportation charges at the rate of rupees 100 per visit. The insurance premium is paid by the central and the state government directly to the insurance companies. The beneficiary households are provided with a biometric smart card and they did not pay any amount to the health service providers. The insurance companies repay the treatment cost directly to the health service providers. Some scholars though have pointed out the limitations of RSBY. First, it covers only hospitalization cases or inpatient services. People do not get financial assistance and outpatient care. Secondly, S. A. Shadri et al. Observe hospitalization charges of RSBY beneficiaries are higher than that of non-beneficiaries. Third, in many cases, healthcare providers are worried about the reimbursement process, so they sometimes refuse the people. Fourth, there are ubiquitous inconsistencies in enrollment. Remote villages have low enrollment rates. The BPL lists which are given to the insurance companies are defective and outdated. Moreover, those lists mostly incorporate only the name of male members of the household. Based on their empirical findings, Nandi et al. Have observed that the rate of enrollment in RSBY is associated with caste, religion, and gender. Unprivileged sections of the society, especially STs and OBCs and the Christians, are reluctant to register in RSBY. The rate of enrollment is relatively higher among Sikh community. The female-headed households are most enthusiastic to avail the benefits of RSBY. The relatively wealthier households are more inclined to participate in RSBY in comparison to disadvantaged section. Wage employment. Even as India has seen higher rates of economic growth in recent past, the rate of employment has not kept pace. Sure enough, India needs to go a long way to achieve all-inclusive growth that can ensure productive employment to all. In India, a large number of people live in rural areas. The rural livelihoods depend on agriculture. Income gains from agriculture fluctuate every year and are highly unstable. Given the monsoon-dependent nature of agriculture, wage employments have mitigated the unexpected and seasonal income gains that occur to rural households. In a way, the rural lives are characterized by logics of caste and hierarchy. Gradually, lands are owned by upper caste people, whereas lower caste people work on other lands for wages. Thus, the income equality is also existing in rural India is indexed by caste and status consideration. As the lives of rural people mostly depend on agriculture or natural resources, natural resource management is necessary for them. It is also necessary to create productive assets and infrastructure in rural areas. Considerable political empowerment is also crucial for the rural people, especially for the socially deprived communities. We know that the poor migrate very often in search of work and livelihood. Migration is a testimony to the lack of locally available economic opportunities. Why would they migrate if they get work and employment in the villages or vicinity? Evidently, there is a need for diversification of work in the villages. Agricultural operations alone will not absorb the available labor. There is a clear imperative for the expansion of rural non-farm employment to ensure livelihood security of the households in rural areas. In this context, National Rural Employment Guarantee Act that received presidential assent on 5th November 2005 turns out to be a game changer. The aim of this Act is to boost the livelihood security of the households in rural areas. In this regard, the Act or policy has been designed to provide at least 100 days of guaranteed wage employment to adult members of every household of rural areas in every financial year. The work is mainly unskilled manual work. According to this Act, the implementing agencies are any department of the central government or a state government. 3 tiers of Panchayati Raj institutions, Zilla Parishad, Panchayat and intermediate level, and Gram Panchayat, government undertakings or government authorized non-governmental organization. Such agencies carry out the implementation of any work under the scheme. Minimum wage is decided in relation to the area. Minimum wages are decided by the state government following Section 3 of the Minimum Wages Act 1948 for agricultural labours as applicable in that area. In this policy, unskilled manual work denotes any physical work that can be done by any adult person without having any skill or special training. All works under Manrega should be taken into consideration in the rural areas. The main aim of the policy is to create durable assets and strengthening the livelihood resource base of the rural people. There is no entry of the contractors for accomplishing the projects. All works are performed by the manual labours and machines are not used. The adult members of every household who live in rural areas and wish to do unskilled manual works can apply for the jobs in the Gram Panchayats under whose jurisdiction they reside. Gram Panchayat issue job cards for them. Group applications can also be submitted. As far as possible, works are provided within a radius of 5 km of the village where applicants reside at the time of applying. Their applications for job must be for at least 14 days of continuous work but not more than 6 days in a week. The policy design of NREGA makes it difficult for other public policy because it's an application of provisions of Article 39 and Article 41 of the Directive Principles of State Policy of the Indian Constitution that talks about right to work. Changes in the village economy. Land has always been the most desired asset in rural India. Now it has also become a coveted asset for investors. The demand for land in non-agriculture sectors has grown manifold, especially after the liberalization of economy. The demand got further accelerated after 2005 when the economy achieved 8% growth rate and the SEZ Act of 2005 was passed. But then evidently the supply of land is not infinite. Most of the lands are in the hands of the small cultivators and marginal peasants. Most of them are reluctant to sell the land, for land is a source of occupation and also a source of long-term security. The value of land cannot be simplistically seen in terms of exchange value. After all, the value of land is determined not only by location, specific qualities, but also by other non-economic parameters. Land acquisition for the purpose of development gained momentum in India ever since first 5-year plan was inaugurated. At first, land was acquired for public purpose, including construction of hydroelectric projects, institutions, and industries. When the SEZ Act of 2005 was passed, it opened up way for private investment with minimal taxes and regulation in order to promote exports, develop infrastructure, and generate employment. This act encouraged real estate companies to develop exceptionally large quantity of highly priced land. The land would be acquired for them by the state government at cheap rate. At present, the word land grab is used in the concept of ABD, that is acquisition by dispossession. The word grab is used when the land is purchased forcibly instead of voluntarily. Another feature is that in India, land is fragmented among many owners. So if an investor wishes to buy an outsized land, she has to negotiate with at least hundreds of farmers. In addition to this, ownership of land in rural areas is ambiguous. Such ambiguity creates high rates of court cases in rural land purchase. It would take a long time to resolve court cases in court. For these reasons, private investors prefer to have government obtain land for them. The capability of the state government to provide land to the investors has become a crucial factor in the interstate competition for investment. During post-liberalization period, land is required for commercial, residential, and recreational purposes. IT parks, allied residential colonies, private colleges, and shopping malls are constructed on the acquired land. When the state acquires land, the owner is provided with a monetary compensation as per as the normal agricultural value of land, but the land will soon be converted into commercial places. The owners are not given the commercial rate. Sometimes the common property resources, including government grazing land and wasteland, are sold to the private investors at low price without taking consent from the affected public. In fact, such CPR resources are crucial for the livelihood of large number of poor households in villages. Sometimes the displaced people whose lands get acquired are offered jobs. In reality, it has been observed that such villagers are mostly appointed as security guards, gardeners, drivers because of the low levels of education. It is also reported that the number of people who get these jobs is lesser than that of the people dispossessed. Sometimes the job is provided only to one family member, whereas the whole family is a victim of dispossession. In most cases, job is provided only to the male members of the family. Hence, women are largely neglected in this compensation process. When the people have land, they have stable source of income, but after dispossession, they are employed in informal sectors which are temporary, insecure, and low paying. The cultivators are independent, but when they transform into laborers, they have to work under local contractors. The land grab caused by the establishment of the SEZ drastically changes the social structure of the villages. It transacts the productive assets of the villages. People lose all the resources, including source of grain and fodder, and even identity, which has been developed through generations. The sources of fodder and fuel become also unavailable. Earlier, they collect water from village CPR. After dispossession, they have to purchase water from tanks. In this way, the daily needs become commercialized. Many peasants try to survive by running small enterprises such as vegetable cart, tea stalls after dispossession. In some parts of the country, peasants have protested against land grab. As a result of their protests, sometimes high-profile investors discard the decision to invest. Hence, farmers are viewed as barriers to the country's growth and world-class economic power. Apart from dispossession, the last 3 decades of political economy, India's political economy, have witnessed a significant change, the consequences of which have impacted positively on investment and growth. Some structural changes have occurred in the economy. For example, the contribution of agricultural sectors to the gross domestic product has declined. But in rural areas, half of the labor is dependent on agriculture. The amount of land relentlessly shrinks due to growing population pressure. Besides, agricultural requirements, including fertilizer, pesticides, become expensive. The small and marginal farmers lack opportunity to access cheap source of credit and formal education, so they have limited gains from new technology and the wider market. The young generation of peasant families are less enthusiastic to stay in agriculture. It is not possible for the small and marginal farmers to meet the expenses of large-scale investment in cold storage chain, transportation and marketing networks without community-level participation or state support. To gain from the market economy, there are certain enabling prerequisites that small landholders lack. Of late, agribusiness and contract farming have emerged as a new avenues for capital and in the countryside. Indeed, the well of farmers is burdened with unproductive agricultural practices. They are also bereft of any serious collective action owing to the fragmented political organization of the farmers. Farmers' movement are in a disarray, save few exceptions. On the other hand, there is no proportionate increase in labor-intensive industries to offer employment to those who are pushed out of the presently declining agrarian agricultural sector. Of course, there is a sharp increase in capital and skill-intensive industries. Example, service sector, which contribute more than half of the GDP. Such information technology-based services recruit less than half of the 1% of the total labor force. As per as the government estimates, the incidence of rural poverty has diminished over the years, but we know that malnutrition and ill health are the most disturbing features of life in rural India. There is also considerable decline in common property resources. In agricultural sectors, the income inequality is less pronounced in comparison to the non-agricultural sectors. Therefore, decline in agricultural sectors, advances of non-agricultural sectors give rise to increasing income inequality. In rural India, majority of the people are illiterate. School dropouts are bounded within the contours of secondary education, but employment opportunities are available in capital and skill-intensive industries. As a result, inequality in terms of opportunity, land ownership, education and social status is likely to be expanded. India has a high domestic saving and investment rates. One of the important causes of high saving rate is inequality. The other factors are expansion of banks in the remote areas of the country, profitable and secure saving certificates, and tendency of people, especially people from informal sectors, to save for their future contingency. Future trends. Political capture of institutions. Observers of village India are born to notice the increasing politicization of village society and related local level institutions. Scholars interested in the working of panchayat underline the phenomenon of political capture of institutions. The term political capture connotes an arrangement whereby local level politicians provide benefits and public services to people in exchange for political support. More specifically, it means political intervention in day-to-day lives of the rural people. In our country, Panchayati Raj institutions were meant to enable people to take decisions of their own lives and resources. In West Bengal, for example, the left-front government, after coming to power in 1997, attempted to regenerate PRIs by introducing party politics at the grassroots level. As a result, several political parties tried to create their own strong base in the villages to acquire political power. Due to resource constraints, it is not possible for the political parties to satisfy the demands of the entire, so they prefer to protect only the interest of its active campaigners, even when they may be quite well off. As a matter of fact, panchayat funds would be utilized to secure political power, and most of the beneficiaries of the government schemes would invariably come from the supporters of the ruling party. In such a scenario, general interest of the public very often turn out to be sectional interest of the party cadres and supporters. In effect, rural people are divided into two groups. The first comprising of the beneficiaries of the panchayats and the others comprising non-beneficiaries, the ones who have been deliberately left out of the given the political affiliation. No wonder panchayat elections witness violent clashes between contesting groups. Undeniably, the political capture paves way for corruption, nepotism, favoritism, despotism and violent conflicts in rural areas. Political capture has far-reaching implications. It leads to lack of participation of rural people in decision-making processes concerning their lives and resources. Villagers' perception of panchayats as sectional institutions would propel them towards withdrawal from active participation. Once villagers realize that they have no say in the development activities, they keep themselves away from village constituency meetings. Such passivity towards rural local self-government may open up the way for despotism at village level. To be sure, political capture is a generic term and it impedes functioning of public institutions like PRIs. Many scholars have addressed the politicization issue in their contributions. NGO and social enterprises. A welfare state is expected to provide basic public services to its citizens. Provision of education, healthcare services, hygiene and sanitation, security, shelter and gainful employment falls within the solemn duties of government. But then in reality, public services are always found wanting. Citizens take recourse to multiple ways, both legitimate and illegitimate, of accessing these services properly. Sometimes government cannot administer their policies and projects effectively at a grassroots level. NGOs emerge to plug those gaps with much promise and hullabaloo. The primary duty of NGOs is to bridge those institutional gaps so that people in need get access to various resources necessary for their livelihood. For example, one of the important causes of mortality among infants and children is malnutrition. Huge amounts of rupees every year have been invested by Government of India to combat malnutrition, but still malnourished children are found in the villages and slum areas in abundance. There are numerous NGOs whose avowed mission is to combat high child mortality caused by malnutrition. NGOs and civil society organizations are supposed to act as watchdogs for government programs. They are also there to supplement and complement governmental efforts in important areas of public policy. Given the large-scale NGOization of Indian society, it is likely that future researchers interested in rural India start looking seriously at the role of NGOs in Indian villages. It could well be a promising area of research and help us to understand contemporary dimensions of rurality at another level. Social entrepreneurship is a new buzzword. Village India is home to a large number of social enterprises comprising of innovative small and medium-sized businesses which are designed to improve environmental and human well-being, particularly those who live at the bottom of the pyramid. In a country like India, bottom of the pyramid BOP consists of almost 500 million people. The expansion of social enterprises holds much significance for understanding the social change in rural India. Social entrepreneurship in rural India could offer us another promising field for substantive inquiry. Conventional sociological research has hardly moved beyond the issues of agribusiness and rural non-farm. We wish to flag social enterprises as an important dimension of the present-day rurality requiring scholarly attention. Many support organizations have also emerged to connect social enterprises to rural poor. Although a new wave of enthusiastic social entrepreneurs is seen in India, most of them belong to urban educated poor. They are not familiar with actual reality of rural India. Therefore, social enterprise ecosystem in India lacks the voices and visions of rural people, which comprise almost 80% of Indian population. Students of village society can help plug this gap. Government of India is committed to the promotion and the growth of social enterprises. There is a National Innovation Council and an India Inclusive Innovation Fund has been generated to provide finance for startups in the field. The 12th Five-Year Plan of India has stressed the importance of social entrepreneurship and innovation. The Government of India has recently introduced Section 8 under Companies Act 2013 in order to pave the way for non-profit companies. Besides government initiative, private companies have begun to invest the CSR, that is Corporate Social Responsibility, funds for the promotion of social entrepreneurship. In days to come, Indian countryside is all set to be dotted with vigorous presence of social enterprises of all kinds. As a promising area of inquiry, social entrepreneurship is bound to engage the attention of future scholars. Local innovations and rural entrepreneurs. As you have noticed, studies on Indian villages have so far mainly focused on caste, class, kinship, family, factions, politics, local government, gender and development. Sociologists have hardly taken note of themes like local innovation brought about by villagers themselves in spite of the limited access to resources. The recent exception is a work done by Mitra Bhattacharya and Ghosh, who present a case study of Durgapur Gram Panchayat of Bardhaman district, West Bengal. They demonstrate as to how Gram Panchayat developed a model to control tuberculosis within its jurisdictional area. More scholarly attention is required to focus on issues like this. The intermeshing of rural politics and local economic development and its implications for the emergence of lack thereof of local entrepreneurs will be an exciting area of research. In summarizing this module in terms of contemporary ruralities, what did we learn? We learned that there is a decline of conventional village studies as we have understood earlier. Further, now scholars trying to do village studies are more interested in studying everyday life, especially in terms of relation of state to the village setting. Or they could be interested more in terms of how gender relations are played out in a village setting or in a rural structure. Further, the scholars now not only engage in understanding the everyday life, but also engage in trying to understand and engage with the idea of methodology of studying villages in India. Therefore, what all these scholars are trying to do, they are trying to bring in a study of village in its dynamism. Thank you.